Would each new state be a slave state or a free state? Of course, the southern states wanted more slave states, but the northern states didn't want any more slave states, and most of the presidents were very fearful of some kind of a war breaking out. Obviously with good reason, because the Civil War would eventually break out over this very issue. This issue came to a head around one point during Van Buren's presidency, and that was the annexation of Texas. By this point, the Republic of Texas had just declared its freedom from Mexico in a war, and they wanted to be recognized in their annexation by the United States. But he did not want to do that, even though Jackson was very supportive of recognizing the annexation of Texas. Van Buren had one main policy, and that was to keep peace in the United States and neutrality abroad. He did not want to get mixed up in any kind of war, and he stuck to that quite strongly because the South really wanted Texas to come in as a slave state. So he just tried to stay neutral on that issue, which didn't really help him that much in his whole political career. The issue of the Panic of 1837 was very closely aligned with the banking system. Jackson had done a lot with the bank, and then Van Buren tried to organize some different reforms of the banking system. And there were different opinions about printing more money, not printing money, gold, silver, a national bank, a treasury. It was very complex, and he became in even more of a difficult position after the 1838 election, by which point the Whigs had control of the House and the Senate, so there wasn't too much he could do. One lasting impact which Van Buren did make was regarding the relationship which the United States had with England and Canada, because around this time there were some skirmishes around the Canadian border, most notably in the Caroline incident. And at this point, Canada wanted more recognition as a free country. But he made some strong statements that American citizens should not get involved in any foreign battles, because there were some American citizens who were attacking the British and who wanted to become part of this fight. At the time, it was considered government overreach and a lack of supporting free ideas. Yet, looking at it historically, he actually set in motion the basis of a friendly relationship between the United States and Canada by not getting involved. When he ran for re-election in 1840, Van Buren chose a different running mate. He'd had Richard Mentor Johnson as his vice president at Jackson's suggestion, but by this point, all the important people in the Democratic Party were feeling that he wasn't an asset anymore, so he was replaced by James Knox Polk as the presidential running mate. However, by this point, Van Buren's popularity had really faded, and the Whigs had done a good job of making it look like the Democratic Party's fault that the country was in the sad state that it was by this point, so he ended up losing. But he didn't take no for an answer. Van Buren ran again for re-election in 1844, and then under a different party, the Free Soil Party, which was strongly anti-slavery, he ran again in 1848. As a matter of fact, he unsuccessfully ran for re-election more times than any other former president. Most of them give up after they don't win the second time, or maybe the third.